But they're really a musical form that grows up outside of the church. The medieval church sang Gregorian chant and Christmas masses in Latin, but they didn't sing carols. Carols were in the courts and in the villages and sung to dance tunes. But eventually it did become true that almost all carols, the carols that we possess today, are almost all Christmas carols. And they nicely combine holy day and holiday, and they make Christmas accessible. If you've got a friend who's not a Christian and you want to introduce them to Christmas, you surely want to start with the carols. Yeah. They're infectious and irresistible.
Yeah, and many of them are just rife with theology.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on and on. One of my favorites is "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." That was written by Wesley, right?
Yeah.
Charles Wesley.
Yeah.
I mean, God and man, God and sinners reconciled. I mean, there's so much there that it's just stunning. But it's interesting to know that back when they first kind of came on the scene, there were a lot of very righteous people who were offended.
The Puritans hated carols because they knew they had originated as dance tunes.
Yeah.
And what could be worse than dance?
Right.
So it took a while, and traditions that Christians today assume are almost indispensable for the celebration of Christmas, for a long time were not permissible or characteristic of Christian worship. The Anglican tradition in the UK, from its emergence in the 16th century with Henry VIII, spent several centuries in which almost no Christmas hymn, what we would call Christmas hymns, were written or sung.
Well, you mentioned Cromwell during the course of the English Civil War, sending out town criers saying "No Christmas,
no Christmas,
no Christmas," and then the Puritan Parliament they conducted business as usual every Christmas Day, and then that also in the U.S. the Congress for several years.
It was prohibitionism, really.
Yeah, because it was such an evil...
Well, they thought that Jesus wouldn't have approved of it.
Right.
And in some cases they had a kind of literal view that if you couldn't look in the New Testament and point to a celebration of Christmas, you could obviously point to Jesus' birth, but you couldn't point to a celebration of Christmas, and so you argued it wasn't authorized in the New Testament. And I argue in the book that, in fact, the New Testament is very liberal in that sense, in that God, in choosing to become human, seems to be authorizing the celebration of God on every imaginable stage. Yeah. And so I talk about how it moves from Matthew and Luke to the church's worship to the whole world as the stage for Christmas.
I was astonished to see that in Massachusetts, modern day liberal Massachusetts, Christmas is actually illegal for a few decades. Well, from about 1659 to 1681. I just love this book. But I liked your treatment of Catholic Christianity, Roman Catholic Christianity, and the view of Mary. I mean, Mary's a pretty special person. I mean, she's probably a teenager when she receives this message from the Lord, and as you say, submits her will to the Lord. Talk about Mary a bit.
Yeah, I try to. I think it would be true that even Anglicans, but surely Protestants in general, don't really want to know so much about Mary, don't want to hear so much about Mary, even though she's profoundly important to Catholicism, and especially the last Pope, not so much the present Pope, but the last Pope. So I'm trying to say, these great lines that we say about Mary, they're in the Bible.
Yeah.
Protestants sort of forget that. And so for speaking as a Lutheran or as a Protestant, I'm trying to say, Catholic theology gets a lot of things right about Mary that we should too, and here's what Mary does. When God says, this is what I'd like to do, I'd like to come to earth and do this, Mary, as Catholic theology likes to say, offered her consent.
Yeah.
And the offering of consent, the saying yes to God, really becomes the epitome of what happens when God takes the initiative and humans are invited but not forced to respond.
Yeah, she could have said no.
Yeah.
She could have, and think about that. She could have said no.
Yeah.
I see no reason why we shouldn't love this woman. I mean, she's the mother of our Lord, and we should have very high regard and high respect. As you study, we just have a few minutes left. As you studied for this book, and I'm reading between the lines. This man must love Christmas.
My favorite.
It is?
Yeah.
I mean, because it seems to me that the book is just full of respect and regard and love on your part as an author for this topic. Tell me about Christmas in the Donald Heinz home.
Yeah, well, in my parents' home, which was Dubuque, Iowa, so there'd always be snow. Mm-hmm. And some years we were so poor that my father didn't own a car, and church was 4 blocks away. And sometimes we would be bringing gifts to share with the poor. And the Heinz family would walk those 4 blocks pulling a sled on Christmas Eve, and we would all be starring in the Christmas pageant.
Right.
And it was a Christmas that had 2 poles to it, I guess. One, a rich home life, which I think would be especially true for evangelicals, mm-hmm. who sometimes don't actually have a worship service, but it's in the home. But for us, the heavier pole was surely church, and Christmas was a church festival, and we went to church, of course, all the Sundays of Advent, and Lutherans often have Wednesday evening services during Advent, and then Christmas Eve, and then Christmas Day, and really it's centered for our family the way we thought about Christmas. So when I then grew up and had 4 children, this is mostly in Northern California, of course we had trees, and we even had reindeers prancing on the front lawn and angels flapping their wings. But fundamentally, it was a Christian festival, and the way you celebrated it was the church. The church is the most important host of Christmas if you're going to get it right.
Yeah.
Which is what we tried to do.
God in man is now residing.
Yeah.
Incarnation.
Yeah.
Yonder shines the infant light.
Yeah.
So are you for Christmas these days? A lot of people are dissonant.
Yeah. Yeah. It wounded me when I began to read in the kind of literature that you teach in a university class that Christmas is, especially the American Christmas is simply the civil religion of capitalism. Or Christmas is the sacrament of shopping. I know that that's partly true, in fact, more true than we want it to be, but I had this tremendous sense that, don't these people know how much more it is? That's really what drove me to write the book. I accept the critique of Christmas, that it sometimes sells out to consumerism and Santa Claus can become a shill for advertisers. I accept all that, but I really believed deep down that there was so much more that had to be recovered.
The book is called Christmas, Festival of Incarnation. Donald Heinz is the author. It's published by Fortress. This is a book you might want to buy, friends. I certainly loved it. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for coming our way.
Thanks for having me.